Can someone explain to me why that kid looks exactly like I did at his age? Daniel Hampton tried to laugh when he said it. No one else did. The Langford Ballroom in downtown Chicago had been loud seconds earlier, crystal glasses clinking, donors discussing Senate campaigns, a string quartet gliding through something classical and forgettable. Now. Silence. Thick. Immediate. Uncomfortable. Every head turned. Daniel stood near the stage beneath a cascade of chandeliers, tuxedo sharp, posture controlled. Welcome back and thank you for choosing to spend your time here with us at Tales. Your presence means everything, and we promise this story will stay with you long after it ends. If you believe in stories that change perspectives, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's build this community together. Now, let's get into the story. The same man whose name crowned half the city skyline. The same man politicians courted and banks trusted without question. But he wasn't looking at the crowd. He was staring at a boy. 8 years old. Standing beside a woman in a simple navy dress that didn't belong in a room built for generational wealth. The boy's hand tightened around his mother's fingers. Steel gray eyes. Sharp jawline. And just beneath his right ear, barely visible under the ballroom lights, a crescent-shaped birthmark Daniel Hampton had seen in his own reflection for 46 years. The resemblance wasn't flattering. It was undeniable. Daniel stepped closer, abandoning the stage, abandoning the script, abandoning the evening's carefully rehearsed philanthropy speech. Up close, the similarities were worse. Or better. Depending on how you define disaster. He swallowed. This time, he didn't try to make it sound like a joke. Why does your son have my eyes? The mother didn't look surprised. That was the part that unsettled him most. She looked prepared. Her voice, when she spoke, wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You really don't remember me? Sarah Wilfred asked. Around them, Chicago's elite pretended not to stare. Phones lowered slowly. Security exchanged glances but held position. Because this wasn't a drunken outburst. It was recognition. And recognition is louder than scandal. William looked up at the man towering above him. Not intimidated, not impressed. Just curious. Daniel felt something unfamiliar press against his ribs. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Memory. But it slipped away before he could grab it. Tonight was supposed to be about scholarships. About legacy. About the Hampton Foundation investing in the next generation of leaders. Instead, legacy was staring back at him in a second-hand blazer and scuffed dress shoes. If you believe the truth has a way of showing up uninvited, remember this moment. Because this didn't begin in a ballroom. It began 8 years earlier, on a balcony overlooking Chicago, on a night Daniel Hampton told a young woman he didn't believe in accidents. Standing there now, staring at the living contradiction of his own philosophy, he felt something shift. Some decisions don't disappear. They grow up. And his name was William. Daniel Hampton did not believe in chaos. He believed in leverage. In contracts signed in corner offices overlooking Lake Michigan. In strategic silence during negotiations. In knowing 3 moves ahead before anyone else realized there was a game being played. By 46, he had reshaped Chicago's skyline in brushed steel and reflective glass. The Hampton Tower on Wacker Drive. The waterfront luxury redevelopment near Navy Pier. University wings stamped with his surname in polished brass. He built structures that didn't crack. Deals that didn't wobble. Reputations that didn't bleed. His Gold Coast penthouse reflected the same philosophy: clean lines, controlled lighting, art selected by consultants, not emotion. Even the view felt curated, the city stretching below like something he had personally engineered. He never married. Never risked scandal. Never allowed personal attachments to complicate ambition. His board admired that about him. Investors trusted it. Political allies depended on it. Daniel Hampton was predictable in the way powerful men need to be. Which is why the boy in the ballroom unsettled him. Because resemblance wasn't the problem. Coincidences happened. Chicago had millions of people. But instinct didn't lie. Back in the ballroom, after Sarah's question, "You really don't remember me?" Something old and faint stirred behind his composure. A balcony. Rain hitting stone. City lights blurring against glass. He pushed it away. Memory was unreliable. Emotion even worse. He turned slightly, aware that several trustees from the Hampton Foundation were watching from across the room. His chief legal advisor, Martin Keller, stood rigid near the bar, eyes sharp, already calculating potential fallout. Daniel forced his voice back into its usual register. "I think," he said carefully, "we should speak privately." It wasn't a request. But Sarah didn't move immediately. She studied him. Not with admiration. Not with fear. With recognition. That unsettled him more than the birthmark. William glanced between them again, confused but observant. The kid had a steady gaze, the kind Daniel recognized from old photographs of himself at that age. Too serious for childhood. Too aware. That was impossible. Daniel cleared his throat and stepped back toward the side corridor near the ballroom entrance. Security subtly redirected foot traffic. The quartet resumed playing, but the music felt thinner now, artificial. As he waited for Sarah to follow, Daniel's pulse refused to steady. He told himself this was simple. A misunderstanding. An awkward coincidence amplified by lighting and imagination. He had built an empire by eliminating risk early. This would be no different. But when he looked at William one more time, really looked, he didn't see risk. He saw familiarity. And for the first time in decades, Daniel Hampton felt something he had spent his entire adult life avoiding. Uncertainty. 8 years earlier, he had said something careless on a balcony overlooking this same city. He couldn't remember the entire conversation. But he remembered the rain. And he remembered the girl who didn't seem impressed by his last name. Standing in that ballroom now, watching her walk toward him with their son at her side, one thought pressed against his carefully ordered world. What if this wasn't coincidence? What if this was consequence? And consequences, unlike deals, could not be renegotiated. Sarah Wilfred had rehearsed this moment in her mind for 8 years. Not the ballroom. Not the chandeliers. Not the city's elite pretending not to stare. Just the question. And the look on his face when recognition finally caught up to him. She followed Daniel down the quiet hallway just outside the Langford ballroom, William's small hand still wrapped tightly around hers. The music behind them swelled again, artificial and forced, like the room was trying to recover from something it didn't understand. Sarah understood. She had lived with it every day. 8 years ago, she wasn't a nurse working double shifts in Gary, Indiana. She was a 22-year-old nursing student in Chicago, juggling classes and part-time catering jobs to cover tuition. One of those jobs placed her inside a Gold Coast penthouse filled with politicians, donors, and Daniel Hampton. He hadn't known her name then. But she had known exactly who he was. Now, standing just a few feet from him again, she saw something different in his posture. Less certainty. More memory. William looked up at her, searching her face for answers. She squeezed his hand gently. "Mom," he whispered, "who is he?" Sarah met Daniel's eyes. This time, she didn't look away. "He's someone who once said there are no accidents in life," she replied softly. "And tonight," she added, "he's about to learn he was wrong." The balcony was slick with rain, the city lights glimmering like a million tiny stars reflected on wet streets. Sarah clutched a tray of champagne flutes, trying not to slip, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the man who had unintentionally haunted her dreams ever since that night. Daniel Hampton leaned casually against the railing, tuxedo damp at the shoulders, speaking softly but with an authority that made her pulse quicken. "You told me you didn't believe in accidents," she remembered him saying, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "Everything in life is strategy." Sarah had laughed, something light and nervous, because she didn't know how else to respond. There was charm in his precision, and yet a vulnerability too, a glimpse of the human beneath the wealth and power. They spoke of ambitions, of fleeting passions, of the world outside their gilded cages. It was just one night. A stolen balcony conversation amidst the chaos of wealth and expectation. No promises. No foresight. Just connection. The rain began in earnest, soft drops hitting their faces. In a moment of recklessness, Daniel brushed her hair back, and for a second, everything felt suspended, untethered from consequence. She didn't know then that a tiny life had already begun, one that would carry his eyes and cheekbones 8 years into the future. Sarah Wilfred never imagined she would be a single mother at 22, balancing nursing school, night shifts, and a tiny apartment in Gary, Indiana. The first time she held William in her arms, his gray-blue eyes staring up as if assessing her very soul, she felt a swell of both fear and fierce determination. She named him William after her grandfather, a man who had always taught her that dignity and perseverance were worth more than gold. Days blurred into nights. Sarah memorized the rhythm of feeding schedules, the exhaustion of hospital shifts, and the quiet victories of each homework assignment completed at their small kitchen table. She learned to stretch every dollar, clipping coupons, scouring thrift stores, and counting on sheer willpower to make ends meet. William noticed differences, his eyes, his light hair, the small crescent-shaped birthmark under his ear, but never pressed for answers he sensed were complicated. Sarah answered simply, "Some people don't know what they're missing." And she believed it. She watched him grow into a boy who was curious, confident, and resilient. Every scraped knee, every school project, every late-night whispered conversation built a bond stronger than fear or absence. She celebrated every achievement quietly, with pride swelling in her chest, knowing that love, steady, unyielding love, was the legacy she could give him. Meanwhile, Chicago remained far away, Daniel Hampton's empire expanding without her knowledge. Yet she carried the memory of that balcony night, tucked away as both warning and secret, shaping the life of the son she raised with everything she had. The applause had barely faded when Daniel Hampton approached them, cutting through the crowd like a knife through velvet. No assistance. No staged pretense. Just him, standing inches away, staring at William as if seeing a ghost. "Why does your son look like me?" His voice was low, unsteady, betraying the calm composure he cultivated for decades. William tilted his head, confused but unafraid, eyes wide. He gripped Sarah's hand tighter. Sarah met Daniel's gaze steadily, her voice soft but unwavering. "You met me 8 years ago," she said. "At the Halstead fundraiser." Recognition flickered across Daniel's face, like a candle struggling against the wind. The balcony. Rain. Laughter. Words about strategy and accidents. Pieces of a memory he thought forgotten. "And you're telling me," his voice cracked, fragile. "Yes," Sarah said, each word deliberate. "William is your son." The ballroom held its breath. Donors and socialites froze mid-conversation, pretending not to witness the moment but unable to look away. William stepped forward, his small voice carrying more weight than the room's chandeliers. "I know my mom raised me by herself. I know she works hard. And I know I don't need a rich dad to matter." Daniel's eyes softened, his carefully constructed world trembling. For the first time, power and wealth offered no answers, only a truth he couldn't escape. The DNA results arrived quietly, without fanfare, yet the weight they carried was immense. Daniel sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights reflecting off the glass walls, his hands trembling slightly as he held the sealed envelope. 8 years of distance, denial, and carefully curated control had led to this single moment. The test confirmed it. William was his son. Every number, every probability, left no room for doubt. Outside, the world remained unaware. Daniel's board whispered anxiously, sensing potential scandal. Political allies nudged him toward damage control. But he ignored them. This wasn't about reputation. Not about power or optics. This was about responsibility. For the first time, he felt something entirely unplanned, fear mixed with awe. Fatherhood. He thought of William's words in the ballroom, "I don't need a rich dad to matter." The truth cut deeper than any corporate failure or public humiliation ever could. Without a chauffeur, without a press release, Daniel drove across state lines to Gary, Indiana. Each mile reminded him that wealth had built towers, but absence had built walls. Tonight, he would cross the threshold of a modest duplex, stepping into a life he hadn't planned for. One with a son who already carried pieces of him, and a mother who demanded consistency above all else. Daniel parked his sleek black car on the cracked street outside Sarah's modest duplex, the contrast between his world of glass towers and this quiet neighborhood impossible to ignore. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 8 years press down on him. No assistance. No scripts. Just him, and the life he had avoided. Inside, the scent of home, warm bread, laundry, and faint traces of antiseptic from Sarah's nursing shifts, hit him immediately. He noticed the small kitchen table littered with homework, pencils scattered like confetti of effort. A second-hand bookshelf held worn novels, trophies, and framed hospital certificates. William peeked around the corner, cautious yet curious. Daniel knelt to his level. "I can't rewrite 8 years," he said softly. "But I don't want to miss the rest." Sarah studied him carefully, scanning for arrogance or excuses. She found none, only hesitation, fear, and the shadow of regret. "This isn't about money," she said. "If you step in, you stay. Consistently." Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of her terms. He glanced at William, who handed him a baseball glove with a quiet trust that felt heavier than any empire. For the first time, Daniel realized that presence, not wealth, was the inheritance he could give. The walls of the duplex felt smaller, yet somehow more important than any penthouse he had ever known. Months later, William stood at the podium of a Hampton Foundation event, not as a scholarship recipient, but as a youth speaker. His small hands gripped the microphone, his voice steady, carrying the confidence Sarah had nurtured over 8 years. "I want to thank my mom first," he began. "She taught me that love and hard work matter more than money." Sarah sat in the front row, pride swelling in her chest, as Daniel watched quietly beside her, not as a businessman, not as a celebrity, but as a father finally learning what presence meant. William continued, speaking of opportunity, resilience, and the power of showing up. "We need people who stay, who care, who guide," he said. His eyes flicked briefly to Daniel. "And I've been lucky enough to have both." Reporters murmured. Cameras clicked. When asked about expanding his foundation to support single-parent households, Daniel didn't offer a polished corporate line. "Legacy isn't what you build in glass towers," he said, voice calm but filled with meaning. "It's who you stand beside when it matters." For the first time, Daniel understood that wealth could build cities, but responsibility built fathers. He looked at William, who smiled shyly from the stage, and realized that the boy's life, shaped by love and consistency, was far more enduring than any empire he had ever controlled. The applause rose, genuine and unforced, carrying with it a new kind of triumph, one of hearts, not headlines.